There is a moment in life when you must decide to let go of someone you deeply love. It's not a decision born from anger or hatred, but rather a quiet realization that something has changed. The bond that once felt unbreakable, the connection that seemed destined to last forever, now feels strained, fragile, perhaps even suffocating. And so, the hardest choice arises. Do you hold on or do you let go? But here's the question I want you to ponder. Does cutting someone off from your life bring peace? Or does it create a new form of suffering? Does it ease the pain? Or does it merely create a deeper void, an emptiness that echoes through your heart and soul? It's easy to think that ending the relationship will bring relief, that by severing the ties, the hurt will disappear. But the reality is often more complicated. Love is a river that flows deeply through us. And when it's stopped, when it's cut off, the silence that follows can be deafening. So, we ask ourselves, what happens when we let go of someone we once cherished? Someone who meant everything to us? Today, I invite you to join me in exploring this very question, through a story that is both personal and universal, through the wisdom of Zen and Buddhist teachings, and through reflections from my own journey. We'll try to understand the emotions that swirl within us when we face the difficult decision to cut someone off. It's a decision that leaves us with more questions than answers. A decision that forces us to confront the depths of our attachments, our pain, and our capacity to heal. What happens when we sever the ties with someone we love? Does it set us free or does it entrap us in a new kind of suffering? Let's dive into this question together and explore the wisdom that can guide us through this challenging path. Part 1. A story of love and change. There was a time when two souls were deeply entwined, like two rivers flowing side by side, their paths seemingly destined to remain together. They laughed together, shared their dreams, and moved through life as if nothing could pull them apart. Their love was not just built on affection, but on a profound understanding of each other's needs, desires, and fears. It wasn't just a connection of bodies, but of minds and hearts. Two people who knew each other so well that words weren't always needed. A glance, a touch, a shared moment, and they understood each other's world completely. They celebrated life's small joys and weathered its storms as one. Their relationship felt like a natural extension of who they were, intertwined with the simplicity of being with someone who felt like home. In those early days, their love was free of complications. Every conversation flowed effortlessly, filled with laughter and understanding. They supported each other's dreams, no matter how far-fetched they seemed. There was no judgment, no hesitation, just an unwavering belief that they would always be there for one another. It was the kind of love people dream of, the kind that made everything else in life feel less daunting. But as time passed, something began to shift. What was once effortless now felt strained. The conversations that had once been like gentle streams slowly grew more difficult. Small disagreements, once easily resolved, became more frequent, turning into moments of frustration and misunderstanding. The flow of their communication became muddled, like a river choked with debris. Their laughter became quieter, less frequent, replaced by silence that lingered longer than it should. Silence that once felt comfortable, like a shared understanding of quiet contentment, now felt suffocating. Every unspoken word weighed heavily on them, creating an invisible tension between the two. The bond that had once been pure was now tainted. The expectations that had once been unspoken began to rear their heads. Unchecked and unmet, there was a growing sense that they had stopped seeing each other for who they truly were, and instead, began to see each other through the lens of disappointment and unmet needs. Unspoken resentments festered quietly in the background, poisoning what had once been a wellspring of love. What had been a source of joy and strength slowly became a chain, heavy and burdensome, making it harder and harder to breathe freely in each other's presence. What had once been a mutual dance of love became a tug-of-war of needs, a constant struggle to hold on to what was slipping away. Slowly, the joy that had been so abundant began to fade. They both felt it, but neither knew how to address it, or if they even should. The love that had once felt infinite now seemed finite, confined by the walls they had unintentionally built around each other. The weight of their silence, their expectations, and their frustrations became too much to bear. And so, the decision was made, not with anger, not with harsh words, but with a quiet resignation. It wasn't a decision born from a moment of rage, but from a slow and steady realization that the connection between them was no longer balanced. No longer healthy. There was no dramatic confrontation. No final outburst. Instead, it was an unspoken understanding that the bond they had once shared could no longer be sustained in its current form. The thread that had once held them together was slowly, gently, cut, and with that cut came a sudden, unexpected weight, one that neither had anticipated. It wasn't just the absence of the other person that created this burden, it was the absence of what had been. The absence of what they had built together over time. At first, there was relief. A weight seemed to lift from their shoulders, as though they had been carrying a burden they didn't even know they had. It was as if they had been walking through a dense fog. And now, for the first time in a long while, the air felt clearer. There was space to breathe, space to reflect, space to reclaim their individuality. They felt lighter, freer, as if a part of them that had been heavy for too long had finally been set down. But that relief didn't last. As the days passed, the weight of absence began to settle in. The quiet that had once felt freeing now felt like a ghost. A constant reminder of what had been lost. It wasn't just the presence of the other person that was gone, it was something much deeper. It was the part of themselves they had shared with each other, the small habits, the intimate moments, the routines that had once brought them comfort. That sense of self they had shaped together, that shared identity, was now gone, leaving a hollow space where it used to be. The echoes of love that had once filled the space between them now seemed distant, fading slowly, like the last ripples of a stone thrown into a calm pond. The absence was not just physical, it was emotional, spiritual. Their shared moments, their shared life, no longer existed in the same way. The memories that once brought warmth now brought a quiet sadness, like looking at an old photograph and remembering what was lost. The relief from cutting the connection, while temporary, gave way to something more persistent, the haunting realization that even in absence, love doesn't simply disappear, it lingers, and with that lingering comes a new kind of pain, a longing for what was, and an uncertainty about what comes next. Part 2. Personal Insight, the Echo of Love. From my own experiences, I've learned that love doesn't simply disappear when someone leaves your life. No matter how much we try to sever the ties, love leaves its imprint on us. It lingers, quietly and persistently, in the corners of our hearts, in the spaces between breaths, in the unexpected moments when our minds wander back to them. It's not the pain that surfaces first, but the memories, the small, tender things that once felt like home, the sound of their laugh, the warmth of their touch, the comfort of their presence that once brought a sense of peace to a turbulent world. These are the memories that linger when all else fades. I've spent many nights lying awake, wondering if I did the right thing by walking away. And in those moments of quiet reflection, I found myself not thinking of the arguments, the frustrations, or the reasons that led to the separation. Instead, it was the little things, the shared jokes, the quiet evenings spent together, the way they always knew how to make me smile when the world seemed heavy. It was those tender moments that returned, uninvited but familiar, wrapping themselves around my heart like an old blanket. They weren't just memories, they were pieces of my life, fragments of a love that once felt infinite. But love doesn't vanish just because the person does. It's like the ringing of a bell. The sound lingers long after the bell has been struck. I remember, during this quiet time of separation, how the memories began to resurface. Not the painful moments or the times of discord, but the small, precious instances. The way we would sit together in silence and feel the world slow down. Those moments now seemed like lost treasures. Reminders of a time when everything felt effortless. They weren't just good memories, they were the very fabric of what I had believed to be true love. The hardest part, however, was not the memories themselves, it was my attachment to them. The more I tried to push these memories away, the louder they seemed to become, echoing in my mind like a persistent voice that wouldn't be silenced. I would find myself clinging to those moments, unable to move beyond them. I realized that attachment wasn't just about holding on to the person, it was about holding on to what that person represented, to what I thought love was supposed to look like. The more I resisted, the deeper the pain sank, until it felt like a part of me was being torn away. Here's the catch, the memories, the love, they aren't the problem. The problem lies in my attachment to them. I was holding on to a version of love that no longer existed. And by doing so, I was tying myself to a past that couldn't be changed. It was like trying to hold a river in my hands, no matter how tightly I grasped. It would only slip away. I had to let go, not of the memories themselves, but of the idea that they could bring me peace. I had to accept that while the past had shaped me, it no longer defined my present or my future. The key wasn't to cut off the memories, to erase the love, or to pretend that the past didn't matter. The key was to let go without resistance, to acknowledge the love for what it was, to honor the good moments without trying to make them last forever. Love, after all, is not meant to be frozen in time, it's meant to flow, to evolve, and sometimes, to fade. Letting go isn't about erasing the other person from your heart, it's about accepting that the relationship, in its current form, has come to an end, and that's okay. In the quiet of those moments, I came to understand that love is not something we can control. It doesn't belong to us, nor does it depend on the presence of another. It is a part of us, but it isn't us. And in that realization, there was a kind of freedom, a peace that came from knowing that the past, with all its beauty and its pain, could exist alongside the present without defining it. The love that had once been a force in my life still existed, but it no longer held me captive. It had become a part of my story, not my entire story. And as I learned to embrace the present, the weight of those memories lightened. The challenge, then, was not in severing the ties, but in understanding what those ties meant. Letting go wasn't about cutting away love, it was about releasing attachment. It was about freeing myself from the belief that the love I had experienced could only exist in the past. And once I accepted that, once I stopped fighting the flow of time, I was able to find peace, not in erasing the past, but in allowing it to be just that, the past. Part 3. A lesson in pain, understanding love beyond attachment. Pain, as we all know, is a great teacher. It's often in the most painful moments of our lives that we learn the deepest lessons. At first, it's easy to believe that by distancing ourselves from someone, by cutting them out of our lives, we're freeing ourselves from the pain they cause. We think that the hurt is coming from them, from the relationship itself, and that by ending it, the pain will finally stop. But here's the truth. The pain doesn't disappear. It doesn't vanish simply because we choose to walk away. Instead, it shifts. It finds new ways to express itself, often when we least expect it. It's like a shadow, no matter how much we try to outrun it. It follows us. If we don't understand this, if we don't learn from the pain, the lesson will continue to repeat itself in different forms. It will show up in other relationships, in other situations, always carrying the same lesson, waiting for us to pay attention. This is the nature of suffering. We can try to escape it, we can try to numb it, but it's only when we embrace it and learn from it that we can move beyond it. When I think back to a time I had to let go of someone I loved deeply, I realized that my pain wasn't truly because of them. The pain wasn't caused by the actions they took or the words they said. It was because I had attached myself to an idea, a belief about what the relationship should have been, what it could have been. I had attached myself to an image of the future that was no longer possible. I had envisioned a life with them, a future that now seemed impossible. And the more I clung to that image of what should have been, the more I suffered. At first, I resisted the reality that the relationship was over. I held on to the idea of what it could have been, to the hope that things might change, that we could somehow go back to the way things were. But the more I resisted, the more the pain grew. The more I tried to hold on to what was lost, the more it slipped through my fingers. It wasn't the relationship itself that was causing me pain, it was my attachment to the past. My refusal to let go of a version of love that no longer existed. True healing came when I allowed myself to understand that love isn't about holding on. It's not about trying to force something to stay that has already changed. It's about understanding when to let go. It's about accepting that the love we once shared, no matter how real it was, is no longer the love we have now. Love, like everything in life, changes, it evolves, and sometimes it fades. Letting go isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. It takes strength to let go of someone you love, to accept that the relationship has run its course and that it's time to move forward. It's easy to hold on, to keep trying to make something work, even when it's no longer healthy for you. But to let go, to release someone with grace, takes a kind of courage that is often underestimated. It's not about running away from the pain, it's about facing it with clarity and wisdom. It's the ability to see clearly. To understand that love is not about possession or proximity. Love isn't something that can be owned. It's not about holding someone close, forcing them to stay. True love, in its highest form, understands that love can exist even in absence. It doesn't need to be constantly present to be real. It doesn't need to be forced to stay. And that's the lesson I had to learn. Letting go with grace means accepting that sometimes love doesn't mean holding on, it means releasing. With wisdom, it means accepting that people come into our lives for a reason. But they may not always be meant to stay forever. The love we shared will always be a part of us. But it doesn't have to define us or hold us back. True love is not a tether, it's a freedom. A gift that allows both people to grow and evolve. And in that acceptance, there is peace. The peace that comes not from what was lost, but from understanding that what was shared will always be a part of you. It's the peace that comes from knowing that love, in its truest form, does not bind or control. It flows, it grows, it evolves, and sometimes, letting go is the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for the other person. Letting go is not about erasing the past. It's about freeing yourself from the belief that you need to hold on to it. It's about releasing the attachment that holds you captive to a past that no longer serves you. And when you let go, not in bitterness or anger, but with acceptance and love, you make space for the future, for new beginnings, and for healing. Part 4. True detachment. Loving without clinging. In Zen philosophy, we're taught that true detachment isn't about abandoning love, but about purifying it. It's not the absence of love, but the absence of attachment. We often mistake detachment for coldness, or the idea that we must sever all ties in order to move on. But this is not what Zen teaches us. True detachment comes from the ability to love without clinging, without needing to control or possess. A Zen master once said, "To love a flower is not to pluck it, but to let it grow freely." This profound insight offers a way of looking at love that is both freeing and deeply compassionate. When we truly love, we don't need to own the other person. Love, in its purest form, is not about holding someone close out of fear of loss or needing them to fulfill some part of us. It is about allowing them to be exactly who they are, without the pressure of our expectations, without the need to make them stay. True love doesn't need to control. It understands that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is to release the person we care about. To allow them to move forward in their own journey, even if that means parting ways. I've found that when we release with love, without anger, without resentment, the heart can remain at peace. There is an understanding that the bond you shared was real, but that it no longer needs to define who you are or where you're headed. Love is not diminished by release, it is actually purified. It evolves into something deeper. Something more profound. The pain may not disappear immediately, but it softens, like the edges of a jagged stone worn smooth by the passage of time. It becomes a part of your story, but it no longer controls your path. I remember a time in my own life when I was forced to let go of a relationship that I had once believed would last forever. At first, the idea of releasing them felt impossible. I clung to what we had shared, the good times, the moments of deep connection. I kept holding on, thinking that somehow, if I just held on tight enough, things would return to the way they were. But what I realized over time was that holding on wasn't bringing me peace. It was keeping me trapped in a past that no longer served me. I was living in a story that had ended, and by doing so, I was blocking the possibility of a new chapter. Letting go wasn't easy. It took time, patience, and a deep acceptance of the impermanence of life. But once I made the choice to release, not with bitterness, but with gratitude, I began to feel a sense of freedom. I understood that our love had served its purpose. It had taught me lessons. It had shaped who I am today, and it had given me memories that I would carry with me. But those memories no longer needed to define my present. True detachment, I learned, doesn't mean letting go in anger or resentment. It means releasing with love, understanding that the other person, too, is on their own journey. They are not here to fulfill our expectations, and we are not here to bind them to our desires. The beauty of love lies in its ability to evolve, to be given freely, without strings attached. And when we can love without clinging, without needing to possess, we free ourselves from the chains of attachment. I chose to let go with gratitude for the relationship we had shared. Not with regret or anger over what was lost. That choice to release them, to let them go with love, was not a sign of weakness, but of strength. It was a recognition that love is not about control or possession, it is about understanding, acceptance, and freedom. Through this process, I came to understand that love, in its deepest form, is not a burden. It doesn't need to be held on to tightly to be real. Love is a gift, something that flows, that moves, that evolves. And in letting go, I was able to embrace a deeper kind of peace. A peace that comes from knowing that love can exist without attachment. True detachment is not about pushing love away. It is about loving in a way that allows both people to grow, to move freely, and to find their own paths. And in that freedom, love is not diminished, it is deepened. In the end, we face a profound truth. Love is not something we can hold on to forever. It is not an object to possess, but a flow, a constant process of change. True love does not need to be gripped tightly because its very essence is freedom. When you learn to let go, it doesn't mean abandoning love. It simply means releasing yourself from expectations, from the past, from the images of love you've built in your mind. You begin to realize that love is a living energy, untethered, and it can exist even when we are apart. In that moment, you understand that loving is not about holding someone close, but allowing them the freedom to walk their own path, while you too walk yours. When love is no longer a burden, when you no longer feel shackled by memories or regret, you begin to experience a peace within. You no longer need to fight against loss, because loss is not an ending, but an opening to something new. As you let go, you also open yourself to new opportunities, new connections, and new loves. Let love be a part of your story, but don't let it define your entire story. Love is a precious gift, but true liberation comes from releasing it. Love, in its truest form, is free. It moves, it evolves, and sometimes, it fades, but it never truly disappears. So, my friends, have you reached a place where you can love without holding on? Have you come to understand that in letting go, you open your heart to the full experience of love, as it was meant to be, free, unburdened, and infinite? Step into that journey, with patience and acceptance, and you will find that in allowing love to flow freely, you discover a freedom within yourself. That freedom is the most profound gift you can give to yourself and to those you love.